We'll call this meeting to order. Join me in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good morning. We come to the point in the meeting that we ask for public comments. If anybody's here from the public that would like to share some information with the board, please identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Karen Johnson-Leitner, 15735 38th Street, Mare, Minnesota. I'm not representing Hollywood Township Board, Carver County staff, Carver County Attorney's Office, or the Carver County Commissioners. I am a relevant public watchdog. And first of all, I'd like that nobody's at this meeting, but there's this huge comp plan book that just was put back here, and you have the right to get this book. They say you can look it up in the website, but you have the right to have this book. Attending this meeting, there's a lot of good information on there, and I think it's important we let everybody know that. I came to the work session last week, and it kind of took on my concerns of how work sessions eliminate people and what's happening. They're not filmed. By the time it comes to the commissioners meeting, a lot of this stuff is pounded out, and then they're confused why the citizens come here and they're upset. Work sessions are very, very important to attend. I believe you can attend. You just can't talk. It's important to go there. My concern is from the meeting, too, is they talked about the Rural Service District, and then I was at another meeting where they brought up solar, and I'm not word for word, but basically that it belongs in the Rural Service District, possibly. We went through this, and it sounded like this committee, this Rural Service Committee, wanted strippers, solar, and semis. That was not true at all, and Commissioner Lynch was actually on that, and if he had to interview all those people, and some of them are dead that were on the task force, they would say strictly, no, this is about saving the Rural Service District, not making it into another area that is just a terrible place to live. So in other words, when I watched a video and Mr. Paul Moline came up and he was talking about solar and sunshine and stuff, and I watched the video and I thought, well, what's this all about? So I Googled Met Council, Paul Moline, solar, and then it would have been sunlight, I believe it's called. Well, what ended up happening is, I gotta get this going, and maybe, I ended up Googling that, and here, I think we can get this, oh, here. All right, I was surprised thinking that I could find something out about what he had said. And instead, and you can't read this, but here on November 21st, 2008, Paul Moline got a letter, and it talks about the incorporated, which is Hollywood Township, which is all the little townships, and it goes on, and it talks about, at that point, this was the 2030 comp plan, 2030. So all of a sudden, I'm going, what the heck?
Hey, Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
the documents are upside down.
What's that?
The documents are
Your
upside down.
documents. You're upside down.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Workman. Okay, so anyways, what ends up happening is the solar access, and it talks about solar and talks about sunlight, and this has got to do with the Met Council, guys. And you guys were doing this November 21st, 2008. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, is it possible that this beginning of the solar and not being able to deny it started in 2008 and was part of the 2030 comp plan, and that's why when these citizens come and these people come and sit here and they want to take over District 4 and District 5, is it possible that you already put the noose on the neck? And 3 of the commissioners never have any solar actually in their districts. District 1, District 2, District 3. Only Commissioner Ishii and Commissioner Lynch. So you can see right here that the Met Council is very involved in it. Dave Dreeland, who's not here anymore, he retired. Craig Peterson, we need to find the new names. It sounds like you're going to the townships and you're actually helping them learn about what the comp plan is, but the comp plan isn't what they said it is. The comp plan, here it is again, Paul Moline, 2008.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. 2008. Why? Why did all of a sudden this come in about the sunlight? And why, when they sit here, maybe we didn't have enough information. Maybe we didn't get what we needed to know as citizens. Maybe we're not getting the information because nobody's getting this. Solar is a nightmare. Solar is going to end up hurting people. And your vote is doing in a lot of really good citizens that came up to this podium. And they didn't like coming to this podium, but they returned. And they didn't know really the clue of what was happening to them. My name is Karen Johnson-Leitner. I would rather not be doing this, but I'm a public watchdog, and I will guarantee you the townships are going to know more about this, and so are the citizens. Please, your vote is a lie.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come and share with some information with us? Seeing none, we'll continue. Item number 2 on the agenda is the agenda review and adoption.
Move the agenda as presented, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Ishii, second by Commissioner Workman. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3 is the approval of the minutes of the April 17th, 2018 special session.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
By Commissioner Lynch and seconded by Commissioner Luchnick to approve the minutes of April 17th. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, excuse me, is community announcements. Anybody have a community announcement they'd like to share? Commissioner Lynch.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I'd like to talk about last Thursday, April 26th. The Korean and Vietnam War vets were, they were sponsored by the Waconia Lions, and they sent them out to Washington DC, seeing memorials. They talked to Amy Klobuchar, I think Tina Smith was there, Mr. Emmer, I believe, was there, various other dignitaries. Got to see the memorials, and then came back and had a welcome home parade. It was really very well done. It was wonderful because if you remember in our history, sometimes in Vietnam vets came back, they weren't treated so well. So they finally got a welcoming that they deserved, and hats off to the Waconia Lions. Did a wonderful job. 142 vets sent out to Washington for the day.
Very impressive, well done.
Yep.
And thank them, and hopefully it's something that they might be able to continue in the future. Very good job. Any other community announcements? Just as our society gets older, we have more and more cases of Alzheimer's showing up. The city of Chanhassen, with their senior center, has an Act on Alzheimer's work session scheduled for May 9th from 11:45 to 1 p.m. in the Chanhassen Library. It's free to the public. They would like you to register ahead of time, so give the senior center a call and join them May 9th at noon. Another thing I'd like to mention is this Thursday, May 3rd, is the National Day of Prayer. And if there ever was a time in our country that we needed prayer, now would be the time. So take a moment and participate in the National Day of Prayer. And the last thing I'd like to mention is this Saturday, May 5th, Chaska is holding their annual Christmas in May. And Christmas in May has to do with volunteers getting together to helping people fix up, renovate, improve their living situation. So if you're a skilled worker, or even if you're an unskilled worker, they have jobs for anybody and everybody. The meeting kicks off with a breakfast up at Guardian Angels Catholic Gymnasium, so be there around 7 o'clock. They serve a beautiful breakfast, and then everybody gets to work, and sometime during the early or late morning, early afternoon, they finish with the jobs that they do have. So, any other final community announcements? If not, we'll move on to the item number 5 on the agenda. There's a consent agenda. We have numerous activities, special use permits for Lola's half marathon. We have charitable gambling applications. We have out-of-state training. We have foster care donations, Encore donations. Again, Waconia half marathon and 10-mile 5K races. Right-of-way acquisitions for Highway 41. Professional service agreements for Highway 5 and 33 safety study. We have some collective bargaining agreements with the deputy sheriffs. We have IT restructuring, property tax and assessors, staffing changes, and finally, some abatements and commissioner warrants. And with that, is there anything that should be pulled? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent?
Motion, go ahead.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
Second, Mr.
Motion
Chairman.
by Commissioner Lynch, seconded by Commissioner Maluchnik. Any discussion on the consent? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6 is our report from the Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District. Claire Blesser is our district administrator. And Claire, thanks for coming. And you might want to explain to everybody just where Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed is. Because some of us know we live there, but the rest of the county probably has no idea.
For sure.
Claire, welcome.
Thank you for having me this morning. It's been a few years since I last presented to the board, and I think this is a perfect time to come and actually present to you a work in progress that's been over 2 years in public outreach and a development of a new 10-year plan for our watershed district. So I have a presentation, but if you have questions along the way, feel free to stop me and ask me those questions. As Chair Degler, I should put this in full slides. As Chair Degler mentioned, my district, or I should say the watershed district, Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District, is over 2 counties. And if you look on the left-hand side here is the chunk that is in Carver County. It includes parts of Chanhassen and a corner of Chaska over here. The other part of the district includes Deep Haven, Shorewood, Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, and Bloomington.
But we won't mention them.
They're on the other side. So we have about 50 square miles, 3 watersheds. All 3 are actually in Carver County, with Lotus Lake here starting off Purgatory Creek that flows into Hennepin. Riley Creek starts in Lake Lucian and flows down into Hennepin, eventually to the lower Minnesota River watershed district, and then Bluff Creek to the very west. So a little bit about us. Next year we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary. We have one of our managers is appointed by the Carver County Board, yourselves. Richard Chadwick, Manager Chadwick, was appointed 3 years ago, and his term will be up at the end of July. And then the 4 other managers are appointed by the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners. We have a staff of 5. We'll be at 6 this summer. The very left person on the left of the picture is Terry Jeffrey. You might remember him. He used to work at the city of Chanhassen as a water resource coordinator. He works now for the Watershed District as a permit and projects manager. The gentlemen on the either side of myself are Zach Dickhausen and Josh Maxwell. If you're ever on our waters and you see a boat with bright fluorescent shirts on, digging in the water, pulling stuff out, those are those guys. If you see them, feel free to stop them. If you see them with big wands, they're electrofishing our waters to monitor for carp. And then on the very right-hand side is Michelle Jordan. She's our community outreach coordinator. She works a lot with our residents, answering questions, helping them with any of their queries, whether it be for our cost share grant program or what is the water quality of our lakes, creeks. She does a lot with engaging the community. And then we also have a citizen advisory committee. So our board appoints citizens to advise us on matters of the district. And so we have currently 11 members that come from all over the district. We also have a technical advisory committee that are representative of our cities, our state agencies, our county. So we have folks from Minnesota Department of Natural Resources all the way to members from Carver County or the city of Chanhassen, Chaska that are part of this. Typically they're water resource coordinators or district engineers, sometimes public works directors come, but all engaged to providing technical feedback to the district. I also want to take time to recognize the many volunteers that help us throughout the year. Just last year, we had 40 volunteers that clocked in 345 hours with us. So that's a big accomplishment. The picture that you see there is actually volunteers that gathered to do a community cleanup around Lotus Lake. And this is why I'm here. Back in 2011, we had a 10-year management plan and you're not meant to see what's on the table, but this famous table that basically lists projects and dollar amounts. What we failed to do in that 10-year management plan is provide all the justification of what that project was. And so what ended up is that we were doing plan amendments after plan amendments. So not really a time savings and not really a well-functioning 10-year plan. So at that point we said, okay, we know that our cities are going to be revising their comprehensive plan. Why don't we kickstart and actually refresh this plan and really engage our communities, engage our stakeholders, and develop a new 10-year plan. So we followed a system that really is more than informing, right? We didn't want to start with having a plan and informing the public. So we actually we consulted with them through a survey, we engaged with them through workshops, they collaborated with us. Really a system that empowers all the stakeholders that got engaged into our planning. And so we had a few community meetings throughout the district. We also worked with our Citizen Advisory Committee, our board, our Technical Advisory Committee, and as I mentioned, we had a big community survey. The Survey Monkey told us we needed 400 respondents. We had 418, so I'm pretty happy about that. If you ever need to get members of the public to fill out your survey, the Carver County Library in Chanhassen is a gold mine. You stop people and they're so happy to fill out the survey, so it was really, really fun to see that and having so many members to come.
That's a good plug for the library.
I know, it was great, and they're super nice, and it was a great venue to do that and engage with the members there. And we also held a public hearing and presented what we had, and right now we're on our final stage, so we revised our plan and we submitted it to the Board of Water and Soil Resources for final approval. So a little bit more about our workshop. We had over 500 comments. What you see there is a table that's actually included in our 10-year plan where we listed all the comments, we listed how we categorized the comments, and how they relate to our new 10-year plan. So each comment can be traced to a goal or strategy of our plan. So a person who got engaged into the public process can see how did the Watershed District address that. So very powerful tool. So from there we actually developed 13 goals, and I'm going to list them. They're actually in topical order. So there's not a priority. One doesn't mean it's a top priority. It's all in topical order. So we had comments through our workshops about everything related to water. We asked about what are your comments about lakes, creeks, wetland, groundwater, and anything else. And so one reflection that we heard from our stakeholders is really being effective at what we do in terms of administration. Collect the best available science to support our management decisions. And then also have an education and outreach program to protect and manage our water resources. The next goals that you see up here in red are planning goals, and in blue are regulatory goals. The planning goals is really to be effective on how we plan, but also to consider sustainability measures. How do we deal with our changing climate, making sure that what we're putting in the ground makes sense on the long term. Our regulatory goals are related to our regulatory program, making sure that we have a regulatory program that protects water resources from further degradation. And the last goal you'll see is support Carver and Hennepin County to operate effectively as ditch authorities. We don't have ditches in our district, the county does, but per 8410 rules, we have to have a goal about ditches. And so we can support the county if they need help, but we don't manage those ditches because we don't have any in our watershed. And then the last 5 goals are related all about protecting and restoring and managing our lakes, creeks, and wetlands. You will notice that it's about enhancing what we have, adding, if possible, wetlands back to our landscape, preserving, enhancing habitat for fish, waterfowl, and wildlife, having sustainable management of our groundwater, and also improving the ecology, the functions of the floodplains, making sure they're linked to our landscape and not floating up in the air and you don't have the same effectiveness of a floodplain. And also limiting stormwater runoff, which is one of the biggest non-point source pollutions to our water bodies. We also asked this tough question. We had, over the last few years, asked how do you decide which project goes first, which projects go second. And so we developed a prioritization tool. We asked that tough question to all of our stakeholders who were engaged in this public process. We said, well, how would you do it? And I think what was the most powerful comment we got is one of the people who actually always asked us that question turned back and said, that's really a tough question. There's so many variables. So what we did is we asked all of our communities to give us a list of all the projects they've identified for protecting, restoring our waters, and we ended up with 175. 175 is not a manageable number of projects in terms of implementing in the next 10 years, so we had to reduce it. So this is what we came up with. We actually looked on the left side, on the gray shaded side of this PowerPoint, are variables where we have scoring metrics. How many goals does this project address? How much habitat is restored? How many partners do we have? Do we have partners with financial support? How much pollution is managed? Is it easily accessible? Can we do education in that area? The length of stream bank or shoreline restored or stabilized? Is it sustainable? Is it a project that's short-term or long-term? How much volume can we manage? And is this project benefiting more than one resource? We also looked at our partners to look at coordination. It didn't make sense for us to schedule a project 2 years after a major road reconstruction. So how can we combine projects so it has the least impact on the community where the project is happening? So we worked with all of our communities to figure out the timing of the projects and also to identify if there were some projects that were going to be taken off the books because of logistical factors or or prioritize higher because of environmental risks or how it would fall in their project sequence. We also use what I call decision management trees. Those are system, and I don't mean for you to read all the little details, but this management decision tree is related to lakes. And what this tells you is, in addition to monitoring and assessing, we're looking at the fisheries to see how healthy it is. If we have carp inside a lake, it does not make sense to do internal control. Carp, if in high density, can stir up the bottom, and if you're applying a chemical in the lake that caps the bottom and they're stirring it up, it's short time lived. So for example, an alum treatment, which basically blankets the bottom of the lake and keeps the soil in place, prevents the phosphorus from being released up into the water column. If there were carp in that lake and dense enough, that would be all broken up and that would be a short-term solution. It wouldn't last 20 years or 30 years. It would only last 2 or 3 years, right? So we want to make sure that we have a healthy fisheries, healthy vegetation. We don't want curly pondweed or Eurasian water milfoil to take over. We have to do it in a sequence in a way that we're going to minimize those invasive species becoming dominant in those lakes. And that, in addition, we look at water clarity, total phosphorus, but we also heard from our stakeholders the need to look at other pollutants. For example, chlorides are salts. And so this management decision tree helps us make sure that the science is there and that we're doing the project in the right sequence for the water body. So we went from 175 projects to 34 projects, a little bit more manageable than 175. And in front of you, this is going to look really small on the screen. and I apologize for the members in the audience, but you have in front of you, this executive summary, and if you go to the middle of it, you can see this a little bit clearer. The water drops on this screen, the blue ones are water quality projects throughout the district over the next 10 years that we anticipate in doing. The green ones are stream bank restoration, so along our creeks. We also have a wetland restoration that's right here at the edge. We also have groundwater protection projects. We're actually doing one at Chanhassen High School. And then we're doing a project this year around Lake Susan Park Pond, Lake Susan, which is capturing the water from the pond and reusing it on the ball fields. So actually reducing the amount of groundwater we're pumping to irrigate those ball fields. And we also have a habitat restoration, so a total 34 projects throughout the district. The gray dots that you see on the screen are all the data collection and monitoring sites that we have throughout the district. So we're pretty busy. And overall, if we look at our budget, we run about $3.4 to $3.8 million budget, or levy, I should say, each year for the next 10 years. That's where we're hovering around. And they're distributed in this perspective from planning all the way to data collection, education, and outreach to project implementation. I wanted to give a little brief update on aquatic invasive species. We contribute $25,000 to the city of Chanhassen to run inspections. They do this on Lotus and Susan. For Lake Riley, even though part of it is in Chanhassen, we actually also provide support for Eden Prairie as the boat landing is in Eden Prairie. We don't have right now in our watershed district identified any infestation of zebra mussels, but it's, I'm gonna hold my breath. So we'll see, but the infestation lakes are pretty close. Christmas Lake, which is on the other side of Silver. We even have Bryant right here, over here in 9 Mile Creek. So we're keeping a close watch and we're monitoring our waters for that. We actually have an adopt-a-dock program where residents have monitoring plates out there and they're checking every month to see if they see anything. And then we also have monitoring plates at boat landings. However, with that said, the bad news is we had 2 new infestation in Carver County, in Ann and Lotus with brittle naiad. It was first identified last year. We did rapid response. Brittle naiad is most seen in September, October. It's a late bloomer, so we didn't notice it before, and typically when we do our plant surveys, we do our plant surveys early season and in August. So brittle naiad seems to be that late bloomer where in September you can really truly see it. We did do herbicide treatments on those areas, so we're gonna see how effective those are this year. And then we continue to do plant surveys on those water bodies, and then we have also done some herbicide treatments on a few of the other lakes. Here's a picture. This is mostly in Hennepin, but however, Lotus and the south end side of Silver is in Carver County. You might have heard of the carp in the past or today. If there's too many carp, it's a detriment to the lake. It is an invasive species. What this basically is showing you is we have had no recruitment and the carp population in Lotus is managed. So not a concern. We're still monitoring it, and we're actually looking at doing an alum treatment this fall on Lotus Lake. Now, if you look at the Riley chain of lakes, basically the border is right down here. So you have part of Rice Marsh and Riley. All the carp population was under control. We did go into Lake Susan Park Pond to kind of check things out and notice there was quite a few carp, and I think we hit them at the right moment where they didn't know what was happening when the water got zapped, so we actually caught quite a few, and they went to the compost bin in Shakopee. So we have a facility over there that will take our carp. And so we were able to take them out. There was no recruitment, so right now the carp population in the Riley chain is managed. However, I will give you a heads up, we had a major fish kill on Rice Marsh Lake this year. So anywhere you were drilling a hole, there was a fish that was popping out. So pretty much a pretty decent fish kill that happened. That is not what we want to see on Rice Marsh Lake, because we want the bluegill population to stay alive to eat all those carp eggs. That is our birth control for carp. We are working right now with some hatcheries to get some mature bluegills to put back into restocking basically Rice Marsh Lake, so that hopefully we continue that control. But we'll be paying a close eye on the carp population in that area. So if you see basically people out with these wands trying to scoop up fish in this big giant boat, and that's us working on our waters to make sure that the carp population is controlled and managed. We have a regulatory program. Last year, we basically, through our regulatory program, were able to stop 100 dump trucks of sediment from entering our waters. Approximately 110 tons of less algae was produced because we reduced the amount of phosphorus going to our waters. And then if we were looking at TCF Bank Stadium, about 84 feet deep of water was staying on site rather than being flushed through our systems. I wanted to put a plug here for youth outreach. Last year we reached out to over 1,100 youth. We had grants throughout the community as well, even Chaska Elementary. Their Earth Day mini grants with our teachers, and we led 14 activities throughout the district. Local leaders, we had a watershed tour. I hope you can join us, the Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District, Carver County WMO, and Lower Minnesota River Watershed District on June 20th, 21st. We will have a boat tour on the Minnesota River talking about managing big rivers, and on the 21st, bus tour on managing small watersheds like Riley, Purgatory, Bluff, and the other creeks within Carver County. And we also do continuing education program, turf management trainings, winter maintenance trainings, doing Project Wet, which is water education for teachers, so certifying teachers in our community to do water education. And also on the right-hand side here on the bottom is talking about maintenance of our shoreline. How do you do maintenance? You've put in a project, and now how to maintain it. This was actually a request that came through our Citizen Advisory Committee, so members of the public were saying they were interested in that. And overall, in our next 10 years, we're looking at restoring 41,000 linear feet of stream bank, shoreline, ravine, and slope stabilization, 3,200 pounds of phosphorus, 11 acres of habitat, and 4.1 million gallons of groundwater would be conserved. We also do publish every year an annual report with all these various statistics identified. So with that, are there any questions?
Questions for Claire? One that pops to my mind, if you're gonna stock Rice Marsh Lake with mature bluegills, when are you gonna do that? I mean, how big are these bluegills?
Yeah.
When's the best time to go fishing?
Well, I might not give you that hint. I want them still alive. Right now, we're working with the hatchery, and one of the hatchery we explained send us to another hatchery. So they're at least, I believe, 8 inches. Yep. So we're looking for those bigger ones because we want them to be sexually immature, so that they are going for food, basically, those eggs. So right now, my fish biologist, Josh Maxwell, is working on that, and we're spending about $2,000 worth of fish going into that, so a pretty large quantity, because we want to make sure that we have a population
I
there.
think that's what Lynch spends on his fishing every year anyway, 2,000.
8 inches, nice fillet.
Exactly.
Can't
Other
take them all.
Other questions for Claire? Commissioner Workman.
Mr. Chairman, I enjoyed the presentation, but the meat and potatoes of what you guys often do, as in the past 2-3 years, kind of conflicts with a lot of the lakeshore owners. And I know you guys had some big plans and you kind of backed up on those. I'm not sure if we still have a lot of issues there, but where you do have a little bit of confrontation with the community is in development. So when our cities approve developments or how they do things and culverts and other things, how is that going? Because I do often hear about a little bit of more of an abrasive relationship out there.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, so, and what Commissioner Workman you're relating to is we reinstated our rules. We had rules prior to 2008, and we actually relinquished having the rules, and we realized later on that we should still have rules. Our technical advisory committee recommended us going through the rules process, and we developed the rules. So at that time, it's a rough transition. Anytime you add new rules or regulation, you wish to go as smooth as possible, but sometimes it doesn't. You hit some bumps. However, I believe that right now our relationship with our communities are going well. We do work together, so when we receive permits and we notify the city on our communication with the developer. What's been interesting is we're getting the feedbacks from the cities. What have you guys looked at this? So we're talking back and forth in terms of how the permit is going through our system, and then we're trying to match with their system so that it's coordinated throughout. I believe, sometimes our main purpose is to protect and restore our water resources, and that might be in conflict with development. We want to make sure that if you are to develop, you do it in a way that will not hurt our water resources. And so it's really working with that. We have our developers, when they want to, we encourage them to come to this district as early as possible. And when they do come to the district, we always invite the community that the project is in, so that everyone has the same clear communication on that. So those are a few steps of what we've been doing, and then we've also asked the cities if they have rules that are comparable to us, if they wanted to have a general permit so that they could administer it from the city's perspective. So there's a few things that have happened since the time when we started our rules back in 2016. So, yep.
Good question. There's always I don't want to say a conflict between developers and Watershed, but it's a group that has to work together for the betterment of everybody. And this is a real progressive watershed. And how do we know that? Well, they just moved their corporate office from Hennepin County back to Carver County, where it should be. So.
Yeah, we're in Chanhassen.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for Claire? If not, thank you very much for that report. Moving on, item 7.1, the introduction of the community partnership with foster care licensing and Minnesota Families Initiative.
Good morning,
Kicking this off, Mr. Rod Franks.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm sure that you noticed on your way in today that May 1st has brought with it just a wonderful spring day. What you may not have noticed is May 1st.
2 weeks late, though.
A little bit late. Just 2 weeks ago, we were digging up from snow. But what you may not have noticed is May 1st also brings with it the beginning of Foster Care Awareness Month. And to that end, I have the supervisor of the Family Resource Unit, Mr. Clint Mack, is here with a guest to discuss with you an exciting new community partnership that we've developed to really meet the unmet needs of the foster parents and the children they're caring for in our community. So I'm going to invite Mr. Mack up and his guest to sit at the table. Mr. Mack will introduce his guest and discuss with you the program. And while they're finding their chairs, I'd also like to introduce the manager of the Child and Family Department, where the Family Resource Unit is located, Michelle Sellinger. Michelle, do you just want to stand? And welcome Michelle too. She's providing great leadership in this area that is allowing these types of partnerships to occur.
Welcome, Mr. Mack.
Thank you, Chair Degler and Commissioners. It's an honor to be in front of you and talk with you briefly here. So as my director had indicated, it is Foster Care Appreciation Month, and one way we do that, celebrate and honor our foster parents, is the annual banquet next week, and which you all have been invited to, so I look forward to that. And we were asking ourselves, how many banquets has it been? And I think we have pictures back to 1978. And so we're over 40 years, And this year, we're actually honoring one of our most experienced foster parents who has retired with over 40 years of experience. So that's exciting. I've been in this position as a supervisor here for just over a year, and one of the things that I've wanted to do in this work with foster care is really increase the community engagement and increase support for foster parents. And it just so happened that Curtis Brown, who's sitting next to me, has contacted us last summer. I'll let him introduce himself because there's been changes, so I don't know exactly how to introduce him. He reached out to us last year and said that he and a group of his parishioners had interest in supporting our foster care program and the children and families we work with. And so this is kind of at the same time as where we're trying to do our goals, and that includes, example of that was being at the county fair last year and having a table for the first time in a few years. So some of the things that we've been doing so far after some meetings and trying to get on board with understanding what each other needs and what each other can offer is we've helped Christmas gifts for some relative foster care providers. We had 6 families with 11 children. So Curtis and his organization helped provide gifts for those children. Curtis and his organization also coordinated and staffed a winter celebration in January, which was a great success. And a musician that works with him is also planning on playing music for our banquet next week. So we've got a lot of little things, and we're very excited about what this could look like in the future, and we wanted to share some of that information with you. And we're already starting to plan for some things for this summer when working together, and hopefully that includes some events as well as some social media things. So thank you.
Well, welcome, Curtis, or do we call you Pastor Brown?
You can call me whatever you're most comfortable with, but Curtis is fine. My name is Curtis Brown. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. I'm the pastor of a church. Clint alluded to the fact that there have been some changes. Our church that we started about 3 years ago is called Turning Point Church here in Chaska. We recently did something that is very rare for churches, which is we merged with another church. 2 churches merged together and formed a church of about 400 people, primarily from Chaska, Victoria, slipping over to the border of Shakopee, Prior Lake. But as Clint said, about 9 months ago or so, I reached out. I sent a blind email to a place called the Carver County Foster Care Licensing, and fully expecting to maybe not hear something back. Because my email just said something like this. I'm pastor of a local church, talked to a number of families in our church, and we seem to have a pretty high percentage of people who have a heart for fostering and adopting or are already involved in that. And that was something that, as I looked around at our young congregation, just very much stood out to me. So that was kind of a no-brainer to see that was kind of an area of competence and calling, I guess you would say. And so I reached out to Clint and did get an email back. They invited me over to just chat with them. And really it was just, we have a heart for this. How can we help? And it began with that conversation. And we just wanted to know, were there any areas, were there some pockets, were there some areas where experienced, foster parents could plug in and help? Were there areas where people who had just a desire to help could plug in? And so we've just been slowly but surely over the past few months trying to find those areas. And it's, I think, become a great, at least from our standpoint, has become a really a great template for a kind of a public-private partnership. There are just some areas where where there are needs that the department has, and it just so happens every time there seems to be just that little place where, as things oftentimes happen where there's not unlimited funding, there can be some needs. It just seems like there's kind of the right person at the right time to plug in, which has been fantastic from our standpoint, because we just literally did just have a desire to help. But I think it's been really forward thinking on the part of the department. To say, what, listen, yes, this is a place where if you would like to help us, we would love to invite that. And it's just been, I can't, so often you're prepared to begin a partnership and kind of find the areas where things don't go so well and they kind of fall down by the wayside. And so far, I think it's been very positive. And I will just say, since we're providing the music for the banquet, it's worth the price of admission, so you should be there just for that. But we are looking for more places to partner together. We formed an organization called the Minnesota Family Initiative, which really is two-pronged. It's to support departments like the foster licensing area, and to look for ways to bless and support foster families and kids who, when you look at the statistics, they're overwhelming. And foster families, I know, the people who are doing the most for others actually have a per capita income that's lower than most. So people who don't have much are doing more, and we think that's a reason in and of itself to jump in and to try to bridge that gap and to bless them and bless those kids who don't have much. So.
Sad to say, the need is great, and thank you for reaching out and partnering with Carver County. This foster care business, call it a business, is so needed, and thank you for joining with us to serve these families.
Yeah, thank you. They're amazing, and they do, at least from my standpoint, they do a lot with few resources, and so anything that we can do, or anyone could do to support them, I know would be appreciated, but also I think appropriate.
Anything else to add?
Mr. Chairman.
No, Chair Dregler. I'll open up for questions if anyone else has any questions.
Commissioner Maluchnik.
Thank you. Do we have adult foster care in Carver County?
Chair, yes, we do have adult foster care in Carver County, and that is also part of my department, and we're licensing those as well. It's kind of separate between a couple different departments depending on the facility type and things like that, Chair.
Okay, if someone was interested,
Commissioner.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Someone was interested in that program, what would they do?
Chair, we would be looking at, come to our website. I've been spending a lot of time.
Reiterate that website. What is it?
Carver County what is it? I don't even remember. Main county page, but it says on how to. It says how to become a foster parent, and you can find that in there. I think if you do the main page /foster care, you'll get there as well. So I've been spending a fair amount of time and trying to get more information on that site, and it's still gonna get better. So.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in the demand for that program. Is there demand out there, and are we meeting the demand?
We always hear about the youth, but what about the adults?
There's demand for everything. There's, I think, right now there's some regulations that I'm not the expert on for adult foster care, but there are some limitations on what can be opened and how that works. But there's always, I believe, a demand for good foster parents and make that child or family.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr.
Other
Chairman.
questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for that presentation, and join us anytime, and hope to see you next week, Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on, item number 8 on our agenda is a request for the release of the draft 2040 County Comprehensive Plan. Who's kicking it off? Mr. Moline? Planning and zoning.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Good morning. We are reaching a point here in our process of comprehensive plan development where we want to get this out to the public and all the adjacent communities for review. We've been working on this document for a good course of the year, kind of a tag team effort with our department and Public Works. And I'm going to introduce Brett Angel. He's going to be covering kind of an overview of the plan, and I know Lyndon and Marty are also going to present aspects of this as well. I will get this fired up. So with that, I'll have Brett take it over.
Thank you, Paul. Welcome, Brent.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. So just to start it off, we want to go through the remaining schedule of what we have for the comp plan through the final 8 months or so. We went to the Planning Commission in mid-April, also went to the County Board for the workshop last week with you. So today we're looking at the County Board meeting, and assuming you approve the release, we would start the 6-month review. Tomorrow I'll go into a little bit more of the details in the following slide, but you'll also see some open houses. One is scheduled for June 27th. That will be at the Cologne Public Works Building. The second will be in October. That is going to be here at the Chaska Government Center.
Who's invited to these open houses?
That will be both township officials, city residents, city employees, and general public as well.
And the general public. Thank
Yep.
you very much. Yeah.
We will be doing a Planning Commission public hearing on the final draft. That will be likely in mid-November after any edits are made to the plan after the 6-month review period. Coming back to the board with the final draft in likely early to mid-December. That will also be a public hearing. And then it gets submitted to the Met Council for their final review. So looking a little bit about the draft plan committee engagement. During the 6-month review, we will be sending direct notice to cities, townships, school districts, WMOs, adjacent counties, adjacent townships, adjacent cities. I believe there's a total of 70 different jurisdictions that we mail a direct notice to. That will be both via email and standard mail, so we'll send them 2 notices just to ensure that they do receive the notice that our draft is available for comment. Preliminary review by the Met Council will also happen at this time. So really what they do during this preliminary review is to make sure that we check all the boxes of the requirements. This is something that isn't mandatory but is highly recommended to do. And a link to the plan will be provided on the website. So assuming you approve the release today, I will have that up on the website today. The website for that is just co.carver.mn.us/2040 plan. I mentioned previously the open houses, which will happen in June and October, and then the public hearings in November and December. And we'll also do additional online and in-person techniques over the summer to get people engaged and to comment on the draft. So a little bit on the plan layout. This is the same as what you saw for the 2030 plan with an introduction, a county overview. That is where you're going to see the projections that the Met Council gave for population, households, and employment. The land use plan, and a subset of that is the township policy chapter. So each township has their own policy chapter where they get to choose their density options and additional land use options. Transportation, parks, trails, and open space, water resources, and implementation. So with that, we'll do land use last, but I will kick it over to Lyndon to go over the transportation section. Then Marty will cover the parks, and then I will be back with water resources and land use.
Thank you. Welcome, Lyndon, County Engineer.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Yes, as we discussed at the work session last week, there's an overview of the transportation section. The nuts and bolts, if you will, of the plan is an update to the roadway system plan. Transit, Brett will talk about that a little bit, but we work very closely with Southwest Transit to analyze existing and future transit needs. Bicycle and walking will focus mostly on the future trail network and some new designations by the Met Council. Freight is a new item that we're required to do. So we look at our capacities of our road system as well as some freight generators and some new criteria from the Met Council on freight highway networks. And then aviation is a very small section. So the roadway system plan is an update of the 2030 plan, and we did an amendment, if you recall, in 2014. It looks at our future roadway system needs, updates policy direction, and the guts of it, in my mind, is the financial section, which is not a requirement of the Met Council, but we do a lot of work on that, and that'll be included as an appendix. The goal is to meet the requirements of the Met Council, but also make the plan a usable document for our staff and our partners in the county to make, and the board, to provide a decision making when it comes to transportation. So we will, by the end of the year, have an online portion to the plan, which will be more interactive, So we're going to have a static plan, which is huge, as you can see, but we'll also have a website that shows several performance metrics as well as live mapping so that we can update it as the years go by. This is the guts of the road system plan. We're going to focus mostly today, highlight the existing roadway system, the future roadway system, a little bit about the policy direction and the financial planning overview. So really, the existing roadway system, what we do is we do a traffic model, and we look at how the existing roadway system is doing, and then we project to 2040 based on growth and look at how the roads would operate in 2040 under given scenarios. If you remember, we are required to meet the growth projections supplied by the Metropolitan Council through their Thrive 2040. So that is one set of targets for households, employment, and population. But we also try to look at our own set of metrics on what might happen if those growth forecasts are a little bit off. They're not required for the plan, but again, we do those as our own appendix for our own land use and transportation analysis. So you can see, brief snapshot, what this does is it looks at the current road system as far as congestion goes. Red means the roads is congested today. Orange, it's approaching congestion. Green, no problem. You can see that where there is red, almost entirely is on the trunk highway network, which is not a surprise to anybody, I don't think.
Just a quick question, Linda. Which growth projections are you using? The ones that the Met Council presents, or the ones that our cities and townships think it's going to be? Because we've heard in many cases that we predict more growth than the Met Council gives us credit for.
A great question, Mr. Chair. Both.
Oh, okay.
We are required to use the Met Council numbers, which did go through city and township review. There were comments made by some cities that they thought might be the growth should be a little bit higher. However, we're required to model those and analyze what the impacts are of the Met Council Thrive 2040 numbers. But knowing that that may not be realistic based on historic trends, we are analyzing some what ifs, some sensitivity analysis to show what might happen if that growth is bigger. Really, the area that's most in question, I believe, is the Victoria-Waconia growth area, as well as the city of Carver. Chanhassen and Chaska are pretty well set. So I think those are pretty accurate. And some of the smaller communities, they do have an effect on their own network, road network, but they don't have a huge regional impact. So this is the area where some of that sensitivity analysis will occur. And you can see what we did is the 2030 plan, the growth numbers were a lot higher, and we had a very visionary idea of what to do in the future with our roadway network. We've taken a look at that since growth slowed down 10 years ago. It's coming back. And we looked at what our future road network might be. And we've retired, if that's the right word, about 50 miles of road that was in the original vision. Not to say that that vision is not true, it's just way down the road. It's further than 2040. So what this plan shows really is the red solid lines are our current network, and then the dashed lines are where we might see future new county highways that will need to be built. And then we've added in blue some potential future highways beyond the year 2040 that could happen if growth was higher than expected. So then we look at the future, we look at the 2040 traffic growth, and we analyze that on our road system to see what the consequences might be. So if you saw the existing condition, very little red. Obviously by 2040 there's going to be a lot more cars on the road, there's going to be a lot more population and jobs and households, so you would expect there to be more congestion. That is the case. Again, the trunk highway system is still predominantly more congested than the county roads. There's a few county roads that will have issues. So we're required to look at a fiscally constrained plan. In other words, what do we have programmed in our CIP? And then you analyze that. So that's what this is. So there are roads that have been improved under this scenario, but you can still see there are issues around the county. Then we looked at our 20-year transportation tax plan. If you recall, we did a lot of work on trying to prioritize the major investments in the future, and it does have it does help the network significantly. You can see Highway 5 is in a much better shape than it was before. 212, this assumes a 4-lane section on 212. Actually, this red line is an anomaly. We're still reviewing all the data. I don't think that should be there. So, in essence, the 20-year tax plan has a great benefit to our system, and this really shows that. On to policy. What we try to do is in the plan highlight policy direction. The county already has a few operational policies in place, but this is more of a guide to what could happen in the future. One of the big ones is how do we handle roads, whether they should be a county facility, a state highway, a township, or a city street. So we have some guidance in the plan that will point us in the right direction when the time's appropriate. Safety is obviously huge. We look at the safety around the county. We have a new GIS app that we've developed that can look at safety at any given time. So we will be rolling that out at the end of the year as a tool for us to use. We also are doing a county-wide safety plan update that's partially funded by the state. And if you recall, we did one a few years ago. This will be phase 2, where we look at some more reactive safety improvements in the county. So that'll take about 2 years to do. We just kicked that off. Access management is key for our county road corridors. The state roads obviously carry most of the traffic. We're next, and then the city streets are more for local access. So we have a set of requirements that as development comes along, we want to try to space those new roadway intersections appropriately so we can move traffic as best we can. And then right-of-way requirements, of course, based on the future road width and type, we want to define what that future right-of-way width would be. So mostly for, again, as a development comes along with a plat, we can tell them how much land is needed for the future roadway corridor. Financial planning, again, this is something we do a lot of work with. For the plan itself, we're only required to show our 5-year improvement projects and what we're going to spend our money on. We have included in our 20-year transportation tax projects. That, if you remember, there's 26 major projects that we're funding with that tax, so we are including that information in the comprehensive plan. And then the 2040 needs and revenue gap assessment, that's something we do continuously, and it's not required for this plan, but we will have it as a future appendix when we've updated those numbers based on the new traffic projections. We also need to get feedback from the cities. Obviously, we have met with a lot of the communities on the county road system in their area. They need to react to that, and maybe their ideas are a little different. So before we do the final document, we want to make sure we're on board with their plans. Okay, back. Any questions, Mr. Chair?
Any questions for Lyndon? Not at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I want to go over transit. We are currently in the process, nearing the end of a study with SRF Consulting Group and Southwest Transit to develop the transit section of this plan. For the most part, it's done. We just have a few minor kinks to work out that won't really affect the bulk of what you see within the plan. So with that, this study is looking at the existing transit service, both the fixed route buses and then more the demand response. So that's the Southwest Prime, Metro Mobility, and SmartLink and how they operate within the county. Future transit needs, so where is the potential to possibly expand transit in the future? So looking at Waconia, where are they allocating their new employment and growth, their high density growth, so we can kind of alter the routes based on that. And one that is really guided by Southwest Transit, so that's why they played a heavy role within the study, just to ensure that this is aligning with what they see in their future. And then also looking at mobility trends, this would include transportation network companies such as Uber and Lyft, autonomous vehicles, just to make sure that we have this idea and the concept acknowledged in the plan. While we might not be putting policies in place that relate, it's mostly to ensure that we do acknowledge it, and we do acknowledge that there's a chance that this could influence the transportation network in the county in the future. Looking at the bicycling and walking section, this is really a focus on the regional bicycle transportation network. This section really supports Marty's section, so it's kind of combining the two, more looking at the bicycling within the county. Freight, looking at the existing freight conditions, freight generators, and improvements and future considerations. So with that, I will hand it over to Marty, unless you have any questions regarding those three.
Any questions? We've heard this at the work session, so that's why there is no question at this point.
Thank you.
Marty Walsh from our Parks and Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The parks element, if you will, of the comprehensive plan was reviewed by the Park Commission. We've spent a fair amount of time with that. The chapters here are listed. The introduction really talks about the trends and the goals of our plan. We'll go over the diagrams for the parks and trails along with the bikeway plan. And then implementation really talks about how we are going to deliver the plan. The parks plan this time around is largely an update to the existing plan. Much of the text remains the same as it was in the past or 2030 plan. The focus on our plan this time around is more on internal and on existing parks and proposed future trails and the implementation of those. Our goals and objectives continue to follow the previous comprehensive plan with subtle changes to be consistent with the regional parks policy plan. The parks plan remains the same, no additions or deletions, but noting that Coney Island went from an area of expansion to being incorporated into Lake Waconia Regional Park. A few changes are proposed to the trail and bikeway plan. We'll go over that in just a moment here. The policy plan for trail search corridors and the regional bikeway transit networks are areas that we are trying to be consistent with the regional parks policy plan. For each park, there is now a listing of desired improvements which can be incorporated into the long-term financial plan or the CIP program. So this diagram here does show our existing and proposed trails. The solid lines are those that are existing, and again, providing some examples here, and we do provide credit for some of the facilities which we don't manage. Again, this happens to be the loose line trail which exists. The Dakota Rail Corridor are good examples, and then portions of the Minnesota River Bluffs Regional Trail and the Lake Minnetonka Regional Trail, again, are examples. The dashed lines indicate proposed future trail alignments. The gold lines are those that are linking regional trails that are proposed. The purple lines at this point in time are those that are identified as local trail corridors, but at some point in time will likely suggest that they move to a regional status. Two new items to note here on this diagram. Here are those trails that are identified in blue. This is a new section along Highway 5 and as a result of public input for a desire to connect Waconia to Norwood Young America. The County Road 11 area is also kind of new, at least in terms of its status. It was previously identified as a local trail corridor. We're indicating that we'd like to move that to regional status. It is also a trail corridor that's identified as a part of the regional bikeway transit network. And then also just to mention here, County Road 18 is at this point identified as a local trail, but we believe that this is a strong candidate for the regional bikeway transit network, given that it connects a number of schools, elementary, high school facilities, along with a transit center. So that's something that we would look to continue to advance as plans are more mature with the Metropolitan Council. Our parks plan, again, remains largely the same, and I'll just start from west to east and talk about we continue to have property out here in Camden Township, 30 acres all along the Crow River. It's identified as the Western Carver County Park. Baylor Regional Park, Lake Waconia Regional Park, Carver Park Reserve, which is not managed by us but by Three Rivers Park District, is identified. Lake Minnewashi Regional Park. We have a boat access on Bavaria, and we show two search areas yet, one on Miller Lake and one in the Minnesota River Valley, neither of which are parcel specific. And again, with regards to our acquisition, there's language in the plan which indicates that it's by willing sellers. With that, Mr. Chair, And talk just briefly, one of the initiatives that's in this plan here talks about kind of our planning initiatives. That's not something that we've had in the past. So we are looking to update our master plan for Lake Waconia Regional Park as an example, as well as that Waconia Regional Park, looking to update the event center plan. So we spend more time talking about, in this plan, about upcoming planning work that we would do with regards to our existing facilities, along with the creation of natural resource management plans for our park areas. A couple of other items to be consistent with Regional Parks Policy Plan include special recreation features. Our plan here does recognize the ability to have something like a special recreation feature. An example that we presented during the workshop session would be a historic site, if you will, and that could be the Andrew Peterson Farm. There might be some financial benefits to taking a look at that at some point in time if we want to advance that to a special recreation feature. And the policy plan does mention what's called bridging facilities. These are facilities that can be located outside of regional park areas that are to be more engaging with the public for outreach activities, to introduce people to outdoor recreation activities. So that is also mentioned. And then just with regards to recreation services, our plan continues to be more refined as we talk about how we're going to deliver recreation. And we talk about such things as scholarships, adaptive programs, and public awareness just with regards to how we market, that through website, event planning, and promotional materials. And again, we have an emphasis on environmental and educational programs versus athletics that you'd see in the city park system. And one of the other elements, again, as we talked about in our plan, is that there is a desire based on public input for us to consider eliminating entrance fees into the park areas. So with that, Mr. Chair and others, I'd take questions.
Any questions? Just one comment. In the roadway plan, it was included a financial end of it in the parks plan. Is there any financial considerations, or is it more just planning?
It's more planning, but with regards to when we do a master plan such as Waconia or Minnewaska, those master plans have financial information inside those individual plans. So we didn't seek to update those master plans in that regard, but that, once we create a master plan, then those numbers are brought forward in the master plan process.
Thank you very much. Anything else? If not, okay, back to Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. To go over the final two sections, water resources and land use, starting with water resources, this is really broken down into three main sections. Wastewater, which focuses on subsurface sewage treatment systems. Surface water, which is really just in reference to the CCWMO Watershed Management Plan. And then a water supply section, which references the Carver County Groundwater Plan. Some of the major changes that have occurred to the section since the 2030 plan is the addition of 3 maps, addition of a table showing the number of households which are connected to sewer, and an addition of the water supply section. So any of the changes that have been made to this section compared to the last plan for 2030 were due to the new Met Council requirements. So we just wanted to match those, make sure we had everything included. Looking at land use, some overview and changes. We went through this last week, and you also reviewed it, I believe, in February as well. Preliminary draft was reviewed with the board on February 20th. That was at the board meeting. One major change since then, which we reviewed last week as well, was the re-addition of the Economic Development Opportunity Area section, and that is really to match Watertown Township choosing to continue to include the area at Highway 10 and 7 for a potential for more economic uses, economic development uses. So we needed something in the county plan to support what they were having in their township policy chapter. Some of the major sections of the land use plan, the Met Council community designations, existing land use and future land use, policy areas, natural resources, historic preservation, housing, solar resource, and township policy chapters.
That economic development area up on Highway 7 and 10, that has nothing to do with ethanol, does it?
I do not believe so.
I think that's where the ethanol truck tipped over. Forget it.
To go over the township meeting overview a little bit, so staff met with each of the townships to review their draft policy chapters. This happened between March and through mid-April. Their density selections are as follows in this table. Anything that's underlined shows the changes of what they have done. With that, each of the townships has signed off on starting the 6-month review, except for Waconia Township. They had their meeting last night, so they've discussed this over, I believe, a period of 3 different meetings. I did speak with each of the township supervisors individually on the phone. I wasn't able to make their meeting last night, so from the sound of it, they were going to sign off on the sheet to start the 6-month review as well, but every other township has either signed the sheet or notified me that they are okay to begin the 6-month review. To briefly touch on some of the revisions to the solar resource section, I'll start with how we reference the regional solar map and resource calculations. So that's one of the Met Council requirements, is they have a solar suitability map and then with that a corresponding table. Instead of including that, we're going to reference it with links. That's to meet the requirement, and the links are a little more useful than having just a stagnant map, which is pretty confusing to have by itself. And then some of the goals and policies. The goal and policies directly related to the Minnesota state statute, which is in place, and that's for the access to sunlight. Anything for the development of solar energy systems is guided by the county policy LU20, which is essential services and public services, where we added the term energy production within that to encompass not only solar, but potentially wind or other forms of energy that may come forward in the future. So briefly touching on the Planning Commission review and recommendation. So they reviewed the draft plan, which is for the most part the same as what you have again today. The major difference is the 11x17 map for transportation section. That's why it seems a lot bulkier than what you had last week. They unanimously recommended approval to begin the 6-month affected jurisdiction and public review period, and we are likely going to hold a workshop. Staff is likely going to hold a workshop with the Planning Commission around July or August after the first public open house period.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, again, we are at the point where we are requesting that the board release the draft 2040 Carver County Comprehensive Plan to cities, townships, other adjacent agencies, communities, and primarily the public. This would be a 6-month review period where we would be able to get this out to everybody. They can see the language, see the maps, and we can hopefully get some robust comment back that we would consider when we bring the final version to the board.
Hearing what Paul had to say, any questions for Paul or comments? If not, the request, Commissioner Ishii.
I move to adopt the attached resolution to release the 2040 Carver County Comp Plan for the mandatory 6-month adjacent community and public review.
Hearing the motion, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Commissioner Ishii, seconded by Commissioner Maluchnik. Any discussion? One comment, I thought it was kind of interesting, what you picked for your cover, a picture of a cornfield. So I kind of looked to the back to see what that turned into in 2040, and right now it's kind of blank, and I was just wondering if there was any
There'll
significance.
still be a lot of cornfields in 2040.
Okay, good. Motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You have 6
Thank you.
months, and we'll probably see it again.
You will see us again, for sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Maluchnik,
motion to adjourn the regular session.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Maluchnik, second by Commissioner Lynch to adjourn, and we will be heading into a work session talking about our drafts, master space plan, and our space master plan, whatever. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.